Let's start here. God is not working according to your emotional urgency. That anxiety you feel, the clock ticking in your chest, the mental countdown you've been rehearsing every night, that's yours, not his. God is not pressured by your fear of missing out. He's not hurried by your loneliness, your overthinking, or your timeline. When he says the person will reach out, he means it. But he's going to do it on schedule, not on demand. Now, let's unpack that. There's a very human tendency to confuse silence with absence. When you're emotionally attached to an outcome, your perception narrows. You start interpreting stillness as rejection. But God's silence isn't a void, it's activity happening behind the scenes that hasn't yet entered your field of vision. In the same way that you can't see a tree growing underground before it breaks the soil, you may not see what God is doing in someone else's life before they're ready to step into yours. And let's be honest, most people don't just want contact, they want control over how and when it happens. That's the real issue. It's not just about them reaching out. It's about them reaching out now in the way you imagined with the clarity you scripted in your head. That's not faith. That's fantasy management. That's trying to hand God your blueprint and asking him to bless it. But his ways are higher. His vision isn't limited to your emotional state in the moment. He sees the full picture, what you need, what they need, and the divine intersection that will bring both lives together in a way that's sustainable, not just sensational. Here's the psychological layer. Impatience is often a trauma response. When you've experienced inconsistency in love, people disappearing, withholding, or gaslighting, you start to associate delay with danger. Your nervous system starts firing signals that say something's wrong. I'm being abandoned. But that's not always the case. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is actually alignment in progress. And if you can't differentiate between delay and denial, you'll sabotage the very thing you've been praying for. You'll move prematurely, reach out impulsively, or shut down entirely, all because you mistook timing for rejection. Let's shift to the philosophical. Love, at its highest form, requires both freedom and intention. God does not force people into connection. He prepares hearts, positions circumstances, and prompts action. When he says the person will contact you, it's not a magical outcome, it's a manifestation of alignment. That person will be prompted, but their movement will be theirs. And that's what makes it sacred. They won't be manipulated, guilted, or pressured into reaching out. They'll be convicted. And when someone moves out of conviction, not convenience, you get real intimacy, not just emotional fireworks. So don't confuse divine timing with inactivity. The fact that you don't see them reaching out yet doesn't mean they're ignoring what's been stirred inside them. It might mean God is finishing a work in them that you can't yet perceive, and your role isn't to monitor their pace. It's to steward your posture. Are you ready to receive them when they do reach out? Or are you just obsessed with being pursued? There's a difference. One is rooted in faith, the other in insecurity. So yes, the contact is coming. The move will happen. But it won't happen 1 second before it's meant to. And when it does, it will come with a clarity you didn't manufacture. You won't have to chase it, decode it, or fight for it. You'll just recognize it. Because God doesn't just orchestrate timing, he confirms truth in a way that silences every previous doubt. Stop demanding proof and start honoring the process. What's real doesn't need to be rushed, it needs to be received. Here's the tension. You think their silence means they've forgotten you. That they've moved on, changed their mind, or never truly saw your value in the first place. But what if it's not rejection at all? What if it's refinement? What if the delay isn't them avoiding you, but God preparing them, not just for you, but for the weight of what connection with you actually requires? We tend to take silence personally, especially when we've prayed, fasted, and felt a spiritual conviction about someone being meant for us. So when they don't immediately pursue or respond, we internalize it. We start attaching their inaction to our inadequacy. If they really saw me, they'd be here. If they cared, I wouldn't be waiting. That's not just emotional, it's ego. It's the belief that their current absence must be about us. But it's not always about you. Sometimes it's about them finally confronting what they've been avoiding internally for years. Spiritually speaking, God is not going to launch someone into covenant if they're still ruled by confusion, fear, or emotional immaturity. You don't want a relationship that feels right but is led by someone who hasn't faced their own brokenness. And if that's what this delay is about, if this is the season where God is chiseling away pride, softening the heart, rebuilding trust, restoring clarity, then it's not rejection. It's sacred work. It's someone being healed enough to reach out to you with the strength to follow through, not just initiate. From a psychological standpoint, the hesitation you're witnessing might be less about disinterest and more about unresolved trauma. People who've been wounded by failed relationships, abandonment, betrayal, often have a delayed approach to vulnerability. The very act of reaching out feels risky. It's not that they don't care, it's that caring costs them something. And when God is involved in healing someone, He's not just dealing with their intentions, He's rewiring their instincts. That takes time. And that kind of growth rarely shows itself until the breakthrough comes. Think about it. When God told you they would reach out, He didn't promise they would do it immediately. He didn't say they were ready now. He said they would. That implies motion, something in progress. And we forget that refinement is often quiet. God does some of His loudest work in the silence. But if you misread that silence is abandonment, you'll grow bitter. You'll build walls instead of keeping your heart available. You'll label someone disobedient when they're actually being transformed. This is where the philosophical layer comes in. We've romanticized connection, but we've neglected what it costs. Real love isn't just about knowing who someone is, it's about being strong enough to meet them there. The person God is refining may already know you're theirs. That's not the hard part. The hard part is, can I carry this relationship with honor, intentionality, and emotional maturity? That's what God is helping them build. And when they do reach out, and they will, you'll recognize that the delay wasn't neglect. It was sacred timing. It was someone becoming the version of themselves who could love you the way God intended. So instead of resenting the silence, try reframing it. What if the quiet is evidence that something deep is happening? What if God is protecting the connection by not letting it start prematurely? Wouldn't you rather be chosen from a place of healing than reached out to from a place of panic? Wait with wisdom. Don't let impatience make you mislabel someone's process. What looks like delay might be destiny unfolding at its most intentional pace. Let's get honest about something most people don't like to hear. Just because God confirms someone to you doesn't mean it's your job to chase them. You are not called to force destiny. You're called to prepare for it. There's a huge difference between being ready and being restless. And many people confuse the two because their hearts are anxious, not aligned. You're not meant to sit in limbo, consumed with when they'll call or how it will happen. You're meant to use this time to become the kind of person who can sustain what you've prayed for. The desire to control timing is often a mask for deeper insecurity. The more uncertain we feel, the more we try to grip the process. But think about that. If you trust that God truly said this person will make the move, why are you still mentally writing the script? That's not trust. That's fear dressed up as strategy. When you overfunction, when you try to help God by manipulating conversations, posting certain things to get attention, or finding roundabout ways to trigger a response, you're not walking in faith, you're operating from scarcity. And scarcity mindset never attracts real connection. It repels it. There's something very mature and very necessary about emotional stillness. Not passivity, not apathy, but stillness. A conscious choice to stay grounded in what you know, not what you feel in the moment. The waiting is not punishment, it's preparation. And that means your work right now isn't about them, it's about you. Your job is to stay emotionally regulated, spiritually anchored, and mentally sharp so that when the moment does come, when they reach out, you don't implode under the pressure of it. Because let's be clear, receiving a promise requires as much strength as waiting for one. From a psychological standpoint, most people who pray for divine connection have a very romanticized view of what it means to wait on God. They imagine sitting still, doing nothing, while expecting a relationship to just fall in their lap. But true waiting is active. It's reflective. It's about auditing your own habits, healing your relational wounds, and confronting your triggers. Because if you're not doing that now, you'll end up projecting your unresolved pain onto a connection that was meant to bless you. You'll respond to healthy love with old reflexes. And just like that, what was meant to grow you could end up hurting you, not because it was wrong, but because you were unprepared. This time anticipation is sacred, but sacred doesn't mean stagnant. You should be cultivating your character, not watching your phone. Ask yourself, how do I handle disappointment? How do I manage my emotions without a romantic buffer? Am I building a life I'm proud of, one that a future partner can join, not complete? Let's take it a step further. If the person you believe is meant for you is also being prepared, then it's not loving to interfere with their process. Let God do the heavy lifting. Your role isn't to interrupt, it's to intercede. Pray, not push. Surrender, not stalk. Be available without being desperate. That balance is where power lies. And don't underestimate the impact of preparation. Because when they do make that move, when the phone rings, the text comes, or they show up in a way you didn't expect, you'll know how to handle it. You won't crumble. You won't question whether it's real. You'll recognize it as the fulfillment of something you were already becoming ready for. So stop trying to script the connection. Start preparing to carry it. God's promise doesn't need your pressure. It needs your posture. There's something deeply unsettling about waiting when your mind is filled with uncertainty. It's not just the stillness, it's the story your thoughts write in the silence. And for many people, that narrative becomes toxic fast. Maybe I made it up. Maybe they were never my person. What if I heard wrong? But here's the truth. If God has confirmed something to you over and over, especially with clarity, peace, and consistency, then second, guessing it now is not discernment, it's doubt dressed in logic. One of the hardest parts of spiritual maturity is learning to trust what God said when everything around you is saying the opposite. That's when your faith is tested, not when the signs are all obvious and affirming, but when the silence feels louder than the promise. The human brain craves resolution. It doesn't like open loops. That's why uncertainty feels unbearable. We're wired to close the gap. And if we don't have a clear explanation, we start inventing one. That's where so many people sabotage what God is doing. They try to explain away His promises just to soothe their anxiety. But let me offer a more grounded view. What if the discomfort you're feeling isn't a sign you were wrong, but evidence that your internal framework is being stretched to hold something bigger? If God keeps confirming the same person to you through peace in prayer, alignment in Scripture, recurring dreams, or unexpected conviction, then that's not noise. That's divine consistency. God is not the author of confusion. He doesn't bait us with emotional breadcrumbs. When He speaks, He confirms. And He often confirms again. Why? Because He knows how easily we default to doubt when things don't go our way. Philosophically, this brings us to the tension between free will and divine orchestration. People often ask, well, what if that person doesn't listen to God? Here's the better question. Do you believe God is powerful enough to lead someone even through their resistance? Because if not, then your faith is in the person, not the Creator. God doesn't confirm a connection to torment you. He confirms it so that you're equipped to wait well, not spiral in insecurity. And the idea that you might have heard wrong is often a fear-based reflex. Not always, but often. If you're consistently seeing confirmation, if there's spiritual peace around this person, and if the fruit of what you've seen is growth, not obsession, not chaos, not spiritual disorientation, then you likely didn't miss here. What you're experiencing now isn't confusion, it's tension. And tension isn't proof something's wrong. It's proof something's being built. Psychologically, you also have to understand that clarity doesn't eliminate emotion. You can have complete peace about what God showed you and still feel lonely in the process. That's normal. What's not healthy is allowing emotion to override conviction. That's where the internal erosion begins. You stop trusting yourself. Worse, you stop trusting God. So how do you stay grounded when doubt creeps in? You anchor to the last clear word God gave you. Not the last feeling, not the last hope. The last, we'll go back to it. Revisit it. Speak it out loud. Let it train your focus again. Because what God confirms repeatedly, He will fulfill faithfully. Your job is not to edit the vision based on your emotions. It's to protect it. And I'll tell you this, when the moment finally comes, when they reach out, when the connection ignites the way God showed you, it will feel like remembering something you never stopped believing. And that's the moment your patience becomes peace, because you'll realize it was never about if only when. Stop rehearsing your fears and start respecting what God already made clear. Doubt doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means your faith is growing. Let's talk about the risk of letting bitterness or cynicism take root while you wait. because that's one of the biggest threats to receiving what God has promised you. A hardened heart. You can believe in someone all day long, you can hold on to a vision, but if you allow resentment to poison you in the meantime, you'll damage the very promise you were trying to protect. And bitterness is sneaky. It doesn't announce itself as bitterness. It shows up as sarcasm, as detachment, as an attitude that says, I don't even care anymore, when in truth you care deeply, but you're exhausted from disappointment. If you aren't vigilant, you will start to equate God's timing with his lack of care. You'll interpret the delay as rejection, and your heart will become numb. That numbness, psychologically speaking, is a defense mechanism. You try to shield yourself from hope because hope is dangerous. It exposes you to possible loss, to the pain of another letdown, so you armor up. But here's the truth: God never called you to armor yourself against hope. He called you to guard your heart, yes, but not close it off. That's a profound difference. Guarding means being wise, selective, prayerful. Hardening means shutting down, shutting out, refusing to feel. If you harden, you're not protecting the promise. You're abandoning it. You can feel frustrated, but you have to keep your heart soft. That means actively rooting out bitterness the minute it appears. That means refusing to rehearse every delay and disappointment on a loop. It means choosing gratitude for what you do have so you don't start defining your whole life by what you don't have. Resentment will warp your vision. It will cause you to see God as withholding, people as untrustworthy, and your own heart as foolish for ever daring to believe. And that is a dangerous posture, because if you see life that way, you will sabotage the very relationship you prayed for when it finally arrives. From a philosophical standpoint, there is a subtle arrogance in bitterness. It implies that we know better than God, that if we were in charge, we'd have handled the timing differently. That is a dangerous game. If you truly trust that God is preparing someone else to reach out to you, then you have to also trust that the preparation takes time, and that time is not wasted. You don't see what God is protecting you from. You don't see the inner healing the other person might need to complete before they can come to you. You don't see the invisible battles they're fighting. And you don't see the battles you might still need to win within yourself. This is why it is so important to resist hardening your heart. Because when the moment comes, when the text arrives, or the call comes through, or they show up at your door, you want to be able to receive it with openness, not suspicion. You want to be able to discern clearly, not through a filter of bitterness. You want to be capable of healthy love, not a guarded, cynical kind of half love. Bitterness will talk you out of everything you prayed for. It will keep you rehearsing stories of disappointment instead of expecting redemption. And you cannot afford that. Not now. Not after all this time of confirming, preparing, and trusting. You need to stay open, even if it costs you your pride, even if it costs you your illusions of control. A soft heart is a courageous heart. Don't let bitterness build walls God never asked you to build. Keep your heart soft so that when love comes, you can receive it in full measure, with courage, with clarity, and with gratitude. Acceleration always feels sudden to the untrained eye. But anyone who understands divine timing knows that what looks fast is usually just long preparation meeting the right moment. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up, because when God says they'll make the first move quickly, you might assume that means impulsively, emotionally, even sloppily. But God doesn't rush, he accelerates. And there's a massive difference between the two. Acceleration happens after alignment. It's not random. It's not emotionally erratic. It's the natural consequence of two lives being calibrated behind the scenes until they're finally positioned to collide with purpose. That's when the shift happens. One moment you're waiting, and the next moment everything's moving. Fast, clear, direct. But don't mistake that speed for chaos. God is not reactive. He is intentional. What appears spontaneous is simply the result of a process that's been happening quietly and thoroughly over time. Think about it. A seed doesn't sprout overnight. It breaks through the soil after an extended, invisible process of being buried, watered, warmed, and developed. Most of that work is unseen. And then, all of a sudden, one day, it appears. The same is true of people. The person God's preparing for you isn't just sitting still. They're being challenged, humbled, refined. Their character is being shaped, their fears confronted. God is bringing things to the surface in them that must be dealt with before they reach for you. And when all of that internal alignment reaches a critical mass, movement happens. So yes, the contact may feel sudden. The first move might come out of nowhere. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's random. It's not. They didn't just decide to reach out on a whim. Something shifted inside them. They got clarity. They got courage. And now they're acting on it. The move might be quick, but it's backed by weight, by conviction. That's how God operates. He doesn't send you guesses. He sends you certainty. Psychologically, this is important to understand. If you expect chaos, you'll interpret clarity as suspicious. And if you've been waiting so long that you've gotten used to the delay, speed might feel jarring, even threatening. But your job isn't to slow it down to match your comfort zone. Your job is to be ready, emotionally ready, mentally ready, spiritually clear. Because the truth is, many people ask God for acceleration, but when it comes, they freeze because they weren't truly prepared to receive what they were praying for. So, you need to train yourself to recognize the difference between chaos and divine momentum. Chaos demands attention but lacks order. Divine momentum is focused, it's intentional. It's fueled by peace, not pressure. And when that person reaches out, when they make the move, it won't be with confusion. It'll be with clarity that reflects the preparation they've walked through. You're not waiting for something fragile. You're waiting for something fortified. That's why the delay has felt long. But don't mistake stillness for nothingness. Don't assume that because you haven't seen anything, nothing's happening. Things are moving beneath the surface inside the person inside you. And when it's time, it will all shift fast. So brace yourself, not with fear, but with faith. Because when acceleration comes, it won't give you a 2-week notice. It will arrive with force, with clarity, and with timing that demands you be fully present, not caught off guard, not stuck in disbelief, not held back by old disappointment. Sudden doesn't mean sloppy. It means God is saying now. And when he says it, everything changes. Be ready.